Right, so it is day 112 of 2023, which means two things. First off, it means it is Earth Day, so happy Earth Day. And secondly, it means that it is day 112 of my attempt to plant a tree every single day here in my home outside Lusaka, Zambia. And so we're starting off today under some rather lovely common bamboo, which is Bambusa vulgaris. This is the same clump that was the original parent of the two clumps I planted earlier in the season. And so let's get on with it. Right, so with today being Earth Day, I thought it would be a good day to do something for the Earth. I mean, I feel like I try to do things for the Earth most days, but I thought I'd do something specific. And one of the problems the Earth is currently facing, as we're probably all aware, is that more carbon is going into the atmosphere than is coming out of it. And this is something that has happened over and over again throughout Earth's history. Quite notably, at the end of the Permian period, an awful lot of carbon ended up in the atmosphere, and that ended with a situation that was called the Great Dying. And I would rather a lot of the things alive today didn't die like everything at the end of the Permian period did. And so we're going to be planting plants that are good for carbon capture. So obviously we're going to be starting with bamboo. That is why we started in a bamboo. So the bamboo we started in is Bambusa vulgaris, and that is one of the few bamboos I can say safely this is not, because this is a seedling, and Bambusa vulgaris doesn't have seeds. It is a sterile plant. Another reason that I know this is not Bambusa vulgaris, even if not having seeds was not enough, is that this has green stems, and Bambusa has yellow stems. Even on very small sections it has yellow stems, so this quite safely is not that. It was given to a friend as giant bamboo. Now that could refer to a whole manner of things, or it could be a slight misleading. So it could be referring to one of the dwarf bamboos that are often used as ornamental screens. It could be referring to the rather medium-sized native Oxytonanthera, which does have a green stem, is a clumping bamboo, so it fits both of these, but it's not usually that readily available, except as startups that are actually selling it specifically as Oxytonanthera, as a bamboo for growing charcoal, and most people wouldn't refer to it as a giant bamboo because it's smaller than Bambusa vulgaris, which sometimes is referred to as giant bamboo. I'm hoping that it is Dendrocalamus gigantea, which is what I would call giant bamboo, which is one of the largest species of bamboo. It gets to about 3 times the height in ideal conditions as our Bambusa vulgaris that we started in. It won't get to that height here if it is this species, because our climate isn't quite perfect for it. It will grow in this climate. It grows even a little bit further south in Africa without too much trouble, but it will need at least a little bit of irrigation to get started with. Bamboo does actually do a funny thing once it's mature, which it does tend to water itself to a degree. We'll probably talk about that more at a later time. But assuming that it is Dendrocalamus gigantea, one of the really great things about this is because bamboo leaves, as much as they're a fantastic source of carbon for spreading out on the soil, when they all clump up underneath it, they can tend to create quite a dead soil, because the uniform shape of all those very flat leaves can really limit the rain penetrating through in light rainfall, and it does mean that then you only get rain going through in heavy rain, and it slowly kills off all the small annuals which break up the surface of the soil and make it easier for water to be absorbed, and then you end up with this really compacted soil, which is actually what we've been seeing where we planted the Mapanias and a few other trees around that area, which is a sort of bamboo leaf killed soil. Dendrocalamus has very tall stems without much branching in the lower parts, which means if you can find plants which will tolerate the shade that is created by the bamboo, you can actually plant things in a much closer location to it than you can with the Bambusas, which is great because then you have different types of leaf falling down, you have a much less uniform leaf surface, and then you shouldn't have that sort of bamboo death of the soil, and instead you just get all the benefits of all that extra carbon going into the soil, creating a nice, rich, fertile, moisture-retaining mulch. And because this is a very small seedling, I will also be planting a very large marker plant with it, which is Dracaena fragrans, which I use a lot as a marker plant, but it's actually really, really good for carbon capture as well, because this is a tree that grows more or less consistently throughout the year. It's very environmentally tolerant, and you can just be constantly taking off those lower leaves, which does encourage it to grow up a little bit faster, and it also means that you add that carbon straight back into the soil, where it starts to get consumed, it starts to get added to this sort of the mulch. It's also quite a good air filter, because those large leaves trap an awful lot of particulate matter in the air, whether it's dust, whether it's pollutants, and when you break those off, drop them down, they get down into the soil where they can be slowly broken down and much less problematic. Because they're hopefully being added to a high carbon soil, because you've added all that bamboo mulch, the sort of chemical impact of any pollutants that go down with those leaves is hopefully going to be much, much less than it would be if they were just landing on the soil when it rains. And because bamboos, as with the other grasses, have a nasty habit of being very, very flammable, which means that if a fire comes through here, all that carbon can very easily be sucked straight back up into the sky, I'm going to be putting in a Ficrea fetida, which is the Mauritius hemp, which is quite a good carbon capture plant in itself. It's a little bit slower growing than the other two, but it does get rather massive, and it also has quite water-filled leaves, which means it will slow the movement of fire around it. And finally, we're going to be putting in Euphorbia tithymeloides, which I've used as a toxic barrier a couple of times already. It's also under investigation in some areas for its use as a biofuel, because it does grow very consistently, even in quite inhospitable climates. It doesn't tolerate cold very well, but heat, dryness, quite a lot of wetness for Euphorbia, shade, sun, it's very, very tolerant. So yeah, so that should be everything for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a happy Earth Day, and please tune in again tomorrow when I will be planting something else.